The arena dust settled as Commander Eric Chin stood among 7 fallen Vren champions. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but he remained upright while warriors twice his size lay groaning in the red sand around him. The crowd of thousands had gone completely silent. Eric had not won through strength. He had won through something the Vren had never encountered before. The first champion had charged him like a battering ram, 4 arms swinging weapons that could cut through steel. Eric had simply dropped to the ground and thrown sand into the warrior's eyes. While the Vren clawed at his face, Eric had used his own momentum to send him crashing into the second attacker. The crowd had gasped. This was not how warriors fought. The second and third champions had tried to corner him against the arena wall. Eric had run directly at the wall, jumped, pushed off with his feet and flipped over their heads. Before they could turn around, he had kicked the back of their knees and sent them sprawling. The fourth and fifth champions had learned from watching. They had coordinated their attack, trying to trap him between them. So Eric had changed his entire strategy. He had grabbed one of the fallen energy blades and charged screaming at the larger warrior. The Vren had raised his guard, preparing for a frontal assault. At the last moment, Eric had slid between his legs and cut the straps on his armor. The heavy plating had fallen off, and the exposed warrior had surrendered rather than fight unprotected. The sixth champion had been the smartest. He had hung back, watching, learning Eric's patterns. So Eric had done something completely unpredictable. He had sat down in the center of the arena and waited. The confused warrior had approached cautiously, weapon ready. Eric had simply talked to him in broken Vren language, explaining that the trial was to survive, not to defeat all 7. The warrior had considered this, nodded slowly and stepped back. The 7th and final champion had been furious at this dishonor. He had attacked with pure rage, abandoning all technique. Eric had simply stepped aside at the last moment, letting the warrior's own momentum carry him face first into the arena wall. Now Eric stood alone in the center, covered in red dust and sweat, while the Vren audience tried to decide if they had witnessed brilliance or cowardice. Sovereign Kalira rose from her throne of living stone. She was massive even for a Vren, standing 9 feet tall with silver eyes that seemed to glow in the arena lights. Her crystalline armor reflected the sun like 1,000 mirrors. When she stood, every voice in the arena died instantly. She descended the steps slowly, her 6 attendants following behind her like shadows. The crowd parted as she walked across the arena floor toward Eric. He stood his ground, though his legs trembled with exhaustion. Kalira stopped directly in front of him, towering over his 6-foot frame. She studied him for a long moment, her silver eyes taking in every detail. Eric met her gaze without flinching. 17 generations of Vren warriors have stood in this arena, Kalira said, her voice carrying across the vast space without effort. All have demonstrated strength. All have shown honor in direct combat. All have proven their courage through overwhelming force. She paused, letting her words sink in. This human has demonstrated something entirely different. He has shown adaptation. He has displayed creativity. He has proven that appearing weak can lead to victory. He has revealed that survival and intelligence are their own forms of strength. The crowd murmured uncertainly. Some nodded in agreement. Others shifted with visible discomfort. Kalira raised one of her 4 arms, pointing directly at Eric. I want him. The human delegation on the observation platform went pale. Ambassador Price grabbed the railing, his knuckles white. Your Majesty, Commander Chin is not available for. I want him as my strategic advisor, Kalira continued, her gaze never leaving Eric's face. The Cascade Swarm has consumed 17 of our colony worlds in 3 months. Our fleets, which can level planets, have been destroyed in days. Our warriors, the finest in the galaxy, fall by the thousands. Our technology, superior to every known species, means nothing. She leaned closer to Eric. The Cascade learns. Every tactic we use, they adapt to. Every weapon we deploy, they counter. Every strategy we implement, they overcome. Our strength has become our weakness because we only know one way to fight. But you, human, you showed 7 different approaches in a single trial. You adapted faster than they could respond. Eric's mind raced. This was not what the diplomatic exchange was supposed to be. He had volunteered for the arena trial as a gesture of respect, a way to honor Vren culture. Now he was being recruited for something far larger. I need time to consider, Eric said carefully in Vren. You have until tomorrow's dawn, Kalira replied. If you accept, you will have full authority over our military doctrine. You will command our generals. You will reshape how we wage war. If you refuse. She straightened up, her expression unreadable. The Cascade will continue consuming worlds. including, eventually, yours. She turned and walked away, her attendants flowing behind her. The crowd began talking all at once, voices rising in argument and debate. Eric stood alone in the center of the arena, feeling the weight of an entire empire settling on his shoulders. That evening, Ambassador Price burst into Eric's quarters. "You cannot accept this. It is political suicide. They will use you as a scapegoat when their war continues to fail." "Show me the cascade data," Eric said quietly. "That information is classified." "Then unclassify it. Because if the Queen is telling the truth, this stopped being about politics the moment she mentioned Earth." Price hesitated, then activated a holographic display. Eric studied the projections in growing horror. The Cascade Swarm was not just winning. It was accelerating. Every engagement taught it new tactics. Every defeat made it stronger. The predictive models showed it reaching human space within 2 years. "They are desperate," Price said. "They will blame you when you fail." "Maybe," Eric replied, still studying the data. "But look at these battle reports. Every single Vren engagement follows the same pattern. Maximum force, frontal assault, fight to the last warrior, never retreat. The Cascade does not need to be stronger. It just needs to learn their pattern once." He turned to face the ambassador. "Give me a meeting with Kalira. If I am going to do this, I need to understand exactly what I am walking into." "You are seriously considering this?" Eric thought about the arena, about adapting and surviving. He thought about Earth and the Cascade's projected path. He thought about millions of lives hanging in the balance. "Get me the meeting," he said. Eric stood before the War Council in the command chamber, surrounded by 12 Vren generals who looked at him like he was an insect. The holographic display showed the Cascade Swarm's latest advance, 3 more colony worlds going dark in the past week. "We must hit them with everything we have," General Theron growled, slamming one of his 4 fists on the table. "Overwhelming force. Crush them before they adapt further." "That is exactly what they expect," Eric said calmly. "Every time you commit your full strength, the Cascade learns from it. You are teaching them how to defeat you." Theron's silver eyes narrowed. "And what would a human suggest? That we run away like cowards?" "I suggest we make them chase us," Eric replied. He manipulated the holographic display, showing the Cascade's projected movements. "They follow predictable patterns because you have taught them predictable responses. When they attack, you always counterattack with maximum force. They have learned to prepare for that." "So we do nothing?" another general demanded. "No. We retreat strategically. We make them overextend their supply lines. We let them think they are winning while we set traps they cannot see coming." The room exploded with angry voices. Warriors shouting over each other, fists pounding tables, challenges being issued. Theron rose to his full height, towering over Eric. "You dare suggest the Vren Empire retreat? We have never surrendered ground in 300 years of warfare. Our honor demands we stand and fight." "Your honor is getting your warriors killed," Eric said quietly. The room went silent. Theron's hand moved to his weapon. For a moment, Eric thought the general might actually attack him right there in the command chamber. "Enough," Kalira's voice cut through the tension. She had been watching from her observation throne, silent until now. "Commander Chin has full authority over military strategy. That was my decree. Will you challenge your sovereign's word, Theron?" Theron's jaw clenched, but he lowered his hand from his weapon. "No, my queen. But I will not follow orders that bring dishonor to my warriors." "Then you will watch from the sidelines?" Kalira said coldly. "Eric, present your complete strategy." Eric spent the next hour explaining his plan. The Vren would engage the Cascade at the Helios system, then execute a fighting retreat, drawing the enemy deeper into Vren territory. Meanwhile, smaller strike forces would hit the Cascade's rear positions, disrupting their coordination. It was basic guerrilla warfare, the kind humans had used for centuries. To the Vren it was unthinkable. "I will take the 3rd Fleet to Helios," Theron announced. "I will show you how Vren warriors truly fight." "You will follow Commander Chen's orders exactly," Kalira said. "Or you will be relieved of command." Theron bowed stiffly and left the chamber. Eric watched him go, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. This was not over. 3 days later, the 3rd Fleet engaged the Cascade at Helios. Eric watched from the command ship, monitoring the battle through holographic displays. The initial contact went exactly as planned. The Vren ships hit the Cascade hard, then began their tactical withdrawal. "3rd Fleet, maintain retreat vector," Eric ordered into the communication system. "Do not break formation." Static answered him. Third Fleet respond. Theron, acknowledge orders. More static. Then a voice crackled through one of Theron's subordinates. General Theron has disabled long-range communications. He says the retreat ends now. Eric's blood ran cold. On the display, he watched as the Third Fleet stopped retreating and turned to face the Cascade head-on. Theron was committing to a full frontal assault, exactly the kind of engagement the Cascade had learned to counter. "Get me a direct line to Theron's ship," Eric shouted. "Override his communications blackout." "We cannot, Commander. He has locked down all command channels." Eric could only watch as the battle unfolded. At first, it seemed like Theron might be right. The Third Fleet's concentrated firepower devastated the Cascade's front lines. Vren warriors cheered as enemy ships exploded. Then the Cascade adapted. The swarm ships began moving in patterns the Vren had never seen before. They surrounded the Third Fleet, cutting off escape routes. They targeted the Vren ships' engines first, preventing retreat. They had learned from dozens of previous battles, and now they were applying everything they knew. "Third Fleet is taking heavy casualties," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. 40% losses. 50%. They are trapped. Eric's hands gripped the edge of the display table. "Send the reserve fleet. We have to extract them. The reserve fleet is too far away. They will not arrive for another hour." On the display, Vren ships died by the dozens. Each explosion represented hundreds of warriors. Eric watched helplessly as Theron's pride killed his own people. When the reserve fleet finally arrived, only 20% of the Third Fleet remained. Theron's flagship limped back to the command ship, its hull scarred and broken. The general himself was carried off on a medical stretcher, unconscious and badly wounded. The casualty reports came in throughout the night. 843 warriors dead. Another 400 critically injured. Dozens of ships destroyed or disabled. It was the worst single battle loss the Vren had suffered in decades. Eric stood in the command center, staring at the names scrolling across the display. Each name was a life lost because a general valued pride over strategy. The doors opened behind him. Kalira entered alone without her attendants. She looked tired in a way Eric had never seen before. "The Council is demanding your removal," she said quietly. "They say your tactics led to this disaster." Theron disobeyed direct orders. "I know. I have reviewed the communication logs." She moved to stand beside him, looking at the casualty list. "But my generals say you should have anticipated his pride. That you should have known he would not follow through." Eric turned to face her. "I gave him a chance to save lives. He chose honor over survival. How many more warriors will you sacrifice to preserve tradition?" Kalira was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My entire culture is built on strength and honor. What you ask me to do is tear that foundation apart. I'm asking you to evolve. The Cascade evolves with every battle. If the Vren cannot adapt, you will die with your honor intact but your empire destroyed." Kalira closed her eyes. Eric could see the weight of the decision crushing down on her. She was choosing between everything her people believed and the survival of those same people. "Tomorrow I will address the council," she said finally. "I will declare that your authority stands. Any general who disobeys your orders will face execution for treason. That will divide your military." "I know." She opened her eyes and met his gaze. "But you were right. How many more can I sacrifice for pride?" Eric stood before the War Council with his most dangerous proposal yet. The holographic display showed Karis Prime, a thriving Vren colony world with 2 million civilians. "We evacuate everyone from Karis Prime," Eric said. "Then we let the Cascade take it." The room erupted instantly. Generals shouted over each other, some reaching for their weapons. General Theron, still recovering from his injuries but back on duty, slammed all 4 fists on the table. "You want to surrender an entire world? Without a single shot fired." Theron's voice shook with rage. "This is madness." "This is strategy," Eric replied calmly. He had expected this reaction. The Cascade learns from every battle. Every tactic we use they absorb and counter. But they have one weakness we have not exploited. "What weakness?" another general demanded. "They trust their own data. Their hive mind processes information from every engagement, every captured facility, every piece of technology they encounter. They assume all information is accurate because until now it has been." Eric manipulated the display, showing detailed schematics. "We evacuate Karis Prime completely. Then we fill it with false information. Fake tactical databases showing fictional Vren weaknesses. Corrupted technology that looks functional but contains poisoned algorithms. Navigation data that leads to dead ends. Medical records showing false biological vulnerabilities. You want to lie to them, Kalira said slowly, understanding dawning in her silver eyes. I want to feed them a virus disguised as food. When the cascade integrates this data into their hive mind, it will corrupt their entire decision-making process. They will start making mistakes based on false assumptions. And the 2 million civilians? Theron asked coldly. Where do they go? We have 72 hours to evacuate them to the neighboring systems. It will be difficult but possible. You are asking us to abandon our people's homes. To let the enemy take what is ours without resistance. Theron stood, leaning across the table toward Eric. This goes against everything we are. I am asking you to sacrifice one world to save hundreds of others, Eric said, meeting his gaze. The cascade will continue winning as long as they can predict your responses. This is unpredictable. The council chamber filled with arguments. Half the generals supported the plan reluctantly. The other half called for Eric's immediate removal. Some even called for his execution for suggesting such cowardice. Kalira raised one hand and silence fell instantly. We will vote, she declared. All in favor of Commander Chen's strategy. 5 hands rose slowly. All opposed. 7 hands shot up immediately, Theron's among them. Kalira looked around the room, then at Eric. For a moment he thought she would side with her generals. Then she spoke. As sovereign, I cast the deciding vote. We proceed with Commander Chen's plan. Evacuation begins immediately. Theron's face went dark with fury, but he bowed to his queen and said nothing. The next 72 hours were chaos. Transport ships flooded Karis Prime, pulling civilians from their homes. People cried as they left behind everything they had built. Children asked why they had to leave. Parents had no good answers. Eric worked without sleep, coordinating the evacuation while simultaneously preparing the trap. He filled military databases with false information about Vren shield frequencies. He planted fake research showing that Vren warriors were vulnerable to certain energy wavelengths that did not actually affect them. He created corrupted star charts that would lead cascade ships into unstable regions of space. The most devious part was making it all look genuine. The false data had to be detailed enough that the cascade would believe it was real intelligence they had captured, not planted bait. On the final day, the last transport ship lifted off from Karis Prime. The colony stood empty, a ghost world filled with Eric's poison gifts. The cascade will arrive within 6 hours, the tactical officer reported. Eric nodded. All fleets pull back to the secondary defense line. Do not engage. Let them take the planet without resistance. Several generals looked physically ill at those words, but they followed orders. The cascade arrived exactly on schedule. Their biomechanical ships descended on Karis Prime like locusts. For 3 days they occupied the planet, processing every piece of technology, absorbing every database, integrating every scrap of information into their hive mind. Eric watched the surveillance feeds, waiting. The cascade had to believe they had won a significant victory. They had to trust the intelligence they had captured. On the 4th day, Eric launched his real offensive. All fleets moved to attack positions. Target the cascade staging grounds at Helion Belt. The Vren Armada jumped into the Helion system where the cascade had gathered a massive force. The swarm immediately began executing defensive maneuvers based on the false data they had absorbed from Karis Prime. They adjusted their shields to frequencies that were supposed to be Vren weaknesses. But those frequencies did nothing because the weakness did not exist. Vren weapons tore through their defenses like paper. The cascade tried to target what their stolen data said were vulnerable points on Vren ships. But those vulnerable points were fiction. Their attacks hit reinforced armor instead of weak spots. They attempted tactical maneuvers based on corrupted navigation data. Several cascade ships flew directly into an asteroid field they did not know was there. They are confused, the tactical officer reported, surprise in his voice. Their coordination is breaking down. Eric watched the battle unfold exactly as he had planned. The cascade kept making mistakes, small errors that compounded into catastrophic failures. Their hive mind was working against them, feeding them bad information faster than they could correct it. All ships press the advantage. Do not let them retreat and recalibrate. For the first time in months, the Vren were winning decisively. Cascade ships exploded by the hundreds. Their formations collapsed. Their adaptation process, usually their greatest strength, had become their fatal weakness. When the battle ended 6 hours later, the cascade had lost 70% of their forces in the Helion system. The remaining ships fled in complete disarray. The command center erupted in celebration. Warriors who had known only defeat for months suddenly remembered what victory felt like. Eric sagged against the display table, exhausted but relieved. It had worked. The gamble had paid off. The celebration quieted as General Theron approached. The massive Vren stood before Eric, his expression unreadable. Eric braced himself for accusations, for anger about the unorthodox tactics. Instead, Theron did something Eric never expected. He bowed his head. "I was wrong about you, human," Theron said quietly, so only Eric could hear. "I called your methods cowardice. I see now they are something else entirely. Something we Vren have forgotten." He raised his head, meeting Eric's eyes. Teach me this human way of war. If an old warrior can still learn new tactics, I want to learn from the one who saved us." 6 months had passed since the victory at HFY Belt. Eric stood in the training facility watching Vren warriors practice tactics that would have been unthinkable a year ago. They worked in small teams, using cover and misdirection instead of frontal charges. They practiced tactical retreats, feigned weakness, and ambush strategies. General Theron supervised the training personally. The once proud warrior who had called Eric a coward now taught his own soldiers to value survival over glory. "Good," Theron called out as a squad executed a perfect flanking maneuver. "Remember, appearing weak is not the same as being weak. The enemy must believe the lie." Eric smiled slightly. The transformation had been remarkable. After HFY Belt, other generals had started asking questions. How did the human think so differently? What made his strategies work when traditional methods failed? Theron had become Eric's strongest advocate, translating human tactics into terms Vren warriors could accept. He framed retreats as strategic repositioning, and ambushes as honor through cunning. Slowly, the military culture began to shift. The results spoke for themselves. In 6 months, the Vren had won 12 major engagements against the Cascade. They had reclaimed 8 colony worlds. The swarm that had seemed unstoppable was now in full retreat across 3 sectors. But Eric knew what was coming. He had seen it in the council meetings, heard it in the whispers among the generals. Victory was breeding a dangerous hunger. The summons came that evening. Eric entered the Grand Council chamber to find all 24 generals assembled, along with Kalira on her throne. The atmosphere felt heavy, charged with anticipation. "Commander Chin," Kalira began formally. "The council has a request." Eric already knew what they would ask. He had been dreading this moment. General Theron stepped forward. "The Cascade is broken. They retreat from every engagement. Our scouts report their hive mind is fracturing from the corrupted data we fed them. They are vulnerable now, perhaps for the only time in their existence." Another general continued. "We have located their central nexus, the core world where their hive mind originates. With your tactical guidance we can strike there. We can eliminate the Cascade completely. End this threat forever." "You want to destroy their homeworld," Eric said quietly. "Yes," Theron replied. "Total annihilation. No Cascade ship, no Cascade organism, no Cascade structure left intact. We will erase them from existence." The council chamber filled with approving murmurs. Eric could see the hunger in their eyes, the desire for absolute victory after months of fear and loss. "No," Eric said. The chamber went silent. 24 generals stared at him in disbelief. "What did you say?" one of them demanded. "I said no. I will not help you commit genocide." Theron stepped closer, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. "Eric, they have killed millions of our people. They have destroyed our worlds. They deserve extinction." "They are retreating," Eric replied. "They are no longer a threat to your empire. What you are describing is not war. It is extermination." "They are monsters," another general shouted. "They consume everything in their path. They have no culture, no honor, no right to exist. They are a species trying to survive just like you," Eric said. "They adapted and evolved to become better predators. That does not make them evil. It makes them alive." The chamber erupted. Generals shouted accusations. Some called Eric a traitor. Others demanded Kalira remove him from command immediately. "Enough." Kalira's voice cut through the chaos. She rose from her throne, her silver eyes fixed on Eric. "Commander Chin, you have given us victory after victory. But now you refuse to give us the final victory we need. Explain yourself." Eric met her gaze steadily. 6 months ago you brought me here because I think differently than you do. Because I see options you cannot see. I am seeing one now." He activated the holographic display, showing the cascade's current territory. They are contained. They are weakened. They are no longer expanding. We can establish a quarantine zone, monitor their activity, and maintain a defensive perimeter. If they ever threaten expansion again, we respond with force. You want us to let them live? Theron asked, genuine confusion in his voice. After everything they have done? I want you to win the war without losing yourselves, Eric replied. If you genocide the cascade, what does that make you? How are you different from them? We are defending our people, a general snarled. No, you are taking revenge. There is a difference. Eric looked around the room at the assembled warriors. I have taught you how to fight smarter. I have shown you that strength without wisdom is wasted. Now I am telling you that victory without morality is hollow. Morality does not bring back our dead, another general said bitterly. No, it does not. But it prevents you from becoming the thing you fought against. The council erupted again, louder than before. Eric could see he was losing them. The hunger for vengeance was too strong, too deeply rooted in their warrior culture. Kalira raised her hand for silence. She looked at Eric for a long moment, then at her generals, then back to Eric. The council votes, she announced. All in favor of proceeding with the total elimination of the cascade. 23 hands rose instantly. Only Theron hesitated, his hand staying down for several seconds before slowly rising to join the others. The vote is unanimous, Kalira said. Commander Chin, you will provide tactical support for the final assault on the Cascade homeworld, or you will be relieved of all command authority. Eric felt the weight of the moment. He could give them what they wanted, help them win their genocide and maintain his position. Or he could stand by his principles and lose everything he had built. Then relieve me, Eric said quietly. I will not help you do this. The generals began shouting again, but Eric only watched Kalira. She sat motionless on her throne, her expression unreadable. Leave us, she commanded suddenly. Everyone except Commander Chin. The generals filed out slowly, many glaring at Eric as they passed. Theron was the last to leave, giving Eric a look that mixed disappointment with something that might have been respect. When they were alone, Kalira descended from her throne. She approached Eric until they stood face to face. You would give up everything rather than compromise on this? Yes. Why? Eric took a breath. Because 6 months ago you asked me to teach your people how to adapt. How to think differently. How to survive. But survival is not just about winning battles. It is about knowing what kind of civilization you want to be when the fighting ends. Kalira was silent for a long time. My people want blood, she said finally. I know. They will hate me if I deny them. Probably. You ask me to choose between what my people want and what you say is right. I ask you to choose what kind of leader you want to be. Kalira stood alone in the council chamber with Eric, the weight of an empire pressing down on her shoulders. Outside, 24 generals waited for her decision. Behind them, millions of Vren warriors hungered for vengeance against the cascade. If I choose your path, I may lose my throne, Kalira said quietly. The military could revolt. The people could demand a new sovereign who will give them the blood they crave. That is possible, Eric admitted. And yet you ask me to take this risk. I ask you to be the leader your empire needs, not the one it thinks it wants. Kalira walked to the massive window overlooking the Vren capital. Thousands of crystalline towers reached toward the sky, each one representing centuries of warrior tradition and culture. My entire life I was taught that strength means never backing down. That honor requires total victory over your enemies. That mercy is weakness. She turned to face Eric. You have challenged everything I believed in. Everything my people believe in. I know. But you were right. About the tactical retreats. About the false data. About adapting instead of simply fighting harder. She paused. Perhaps you are right about this too. She walked back to her throne and activated the communication system. Summoned the council. All of them. Immediately. Within minutes, the generals filed back into the chamber. They looked at Eric with barely concealed hostility, assuming Kalira had made her choice and would remove him from command. Kalira stood before her throne, every inch the sovereign. I have made my decision regarding the cascade. The generals leaned forward eagerly. We will not attack their homeworld. We will establish a containment zone and maintain defensive positions. The cascade will be monitored but not destroyed. The chamber exploded. Generals shouted in outrage. Some called for Kalira to reconsider. Others openly questioned her fitness to rule. General Theron's voice rose above the chaos. My queen, the people demand justice for the lives lost. How can we deny them this? Justice and genocide are not the same thing, Kalira replied firmly. Commander Chin has shown us a new way to fight. Now he shows us a new way to win. We will not sacrifice our souls for revenge. The council voted unanimously. Another general protested. You override the will of your own military leaders? I override a decision made from anger rather than wisdom. Kalira's voice carried absolute authority. Commander Chin came to us because we were losing a war we did not know how to fight. He taught us to adapt, to think beyond our traditions, to value intelligence over brute force. Because of him we have won. Now he teaches us the hardest lesson, knowing when to stop fighting. She looked directly at Theron. General, you called him a coward once. You learned you were wrong. Trust that you are wrong again. Theron stood silent for a long moment. Then, slowly he bowed his head. Yes, my queen. One by one the other generals followed his lead. Not all of them looked happy about it, but they accepted Kalira's decision. The containment protocols will begin immediately, Kalira announced. We build defensive stations, establish monitoring networks, and prepare response forces. If the cascade ever threatens expansion again, we will be ready. But we will not become the monsters we fought against. The council was dismissed. As the generals filed out, Eric felt exhaustion wash over him. It was done. The war would end not with total annihilation but with wisdom. Kalira approached him. You have completed what you came here to do. The cascade is contained. My military has learned your tactics. The war is won. Yes, Eric said. I want you to stay. Permanently. As my chief strategic advisor. There are other threats in the galaxy, other challenges we will face. Your perspective, your human way of thinking, it makes us stronger. Eric had expected this offer. He had thought about it many times over the past weeks. I cannot stay. Why not? You have built something here. The warriors respect you. Even the generals who disagreed with you understand your value. That is exactly why I need to leave, Eric explained. What I taught you was not dependence on human thinking. It was how to think differently for yourselves. If I stay, you will always look to me for answers instead of finding them within your own culture. Kalira understood, though sadness flickered in her silver eyes. When will you go? Tomorrow morning. The human transport arrives at dawn. That night, Eric packed his few belongings in the quarters he had occupied for nearly a year. There was a knock at his door. General Theron entered, carrying something wrapped in cloth. I came to say farewell, Theron said. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a Vren honor blade. This belonged to my mentor. He carried it through 40 campaigns. I want you to have it. Eric stared at the weapon. For a Vren warrior to give away such a blade was almost unthinkable. Theron, I cannot accept this. You must. You taught an old warrior that pride can be a weakness. That honor means making hard choices. That true strength includes knowing when not to fight. Theron pressed the blade into Eric's hands. You changed me. You changed all of us. Eric accepted the blade with both hands. You were willing to learn. That took more courage than any battle. Theron nodded and left without another word. The next morning, Eric walked to the landing platform where the human transport waited. He was surprised to find hundreds of Vren warriors lining the path, standing in formation. At the front stood Kalira and the entire war council. We do not say goodbye to warriors without ceremony, Kalira said. You came to us as an outsider. You leave as something more. She raised one of her 4 arms in the traditional Vren warrior salute. Behind her, every general did the same. Then every warrior on the platform. Eric looked up and saw something that made his breath catch. In the sky above, the entire Vren home fleet had assembled. Hundreds of warships hung in perfect formation. As one, they tilted their hulls in the warrior's salute, a gesture of respect normally reserved only for fallen heroes. You changed an empire, Eric Chin, Kalira said. Not with weapons or technology but with wisdom and conscience. You taught us that the strongest victories come from knowing who you are and what you stand for. That is a lesson the Vren will carry forward for generations. Eric returned the salute, then turned and walked up the ramp into the transport. As the ship lifted off, he looked down at the assembled warriors, at the fleet holding their salute, at the empire he had helped transform. The transport broke atmosphere and jumped to faster-than-light travel. Eric sat alone in the passenger cabin, exhausted but satisfied. He had gone to the Vren as a warrior. He had taught them tactics and strategy. But in the end, the greatest lesson had been about humanity itself. That true strength came not from the ability to destroy your enemies, but from the wisdom to know when to show mercy. Somewhere in the containment zone, the Cascade swarms survived, monitored but alive. The Vren military continued evolving, incorporating human adaptability into their warrior culture. And Eric Chin traveled home, carrying a Vren honor blade and the knowledge that he had changed history not through conquest, but through the uniquely human combination of tactical creativity and moral courage. The war was over. Not with annihilation but with something better, the possibility of a future where even enemies could coexist. And that, Eric thought as Earth came into view on the viewport, was worth more than any military victory.